Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Andrew Fort, and we're here for the 33rd in a 35-ish part series, taking on chapter 33 of 32 from Fairy Tale by Stephen King. Literature is all I talk about on this channel. Poetry, short stories, novels, read-alongs, things like this. So if you find yourself here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button. And if you want to help me out with what I'm doing here, hitting the like button tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. Now let's get into it. We're here for the epilogue. What happened after the story? Well, Charlie goes to college, NYU, and he does very well. Then he becomes a professor. Not quite so well. He takes his father down to Impus one time and points at stuff. But, you know, you're not allowed to meet anybody. You're not allowed to talk to anyone. That sort of thing. Why? Why would you? Why would you, Dad? Why would you want to? Considering you lost your son for 4 months to this place, why would you want to talk to people there? I don't know. Here's the real big news that we get from this chapter. Christopher Pauli was murdered in an alley when his wrists were still broken and he couldn't defend himself. Why? I don't know. Why share that? Hard to say. Why did Christopher Pauli exist in this story in the first place, let alone to be brought back in the ultimate chapter of the novel? Hard to say. Who knows? Doesn't matter. Stephen King wrote it, and we had the pleasure of reading it. Now, as far as, and okay, maybe I'm going a little overboard. Maybe I'm being too harsh here. Okay, I'll take it. The one real criticism I have is something that, so this is a writer's note, something that popped up time and again in this book. When Charlie is trying to explain to his father that, yes, no, this is where I was. And you know that because Radar is a young dog again. And how do you know that's Radar? Well, she knew her way around the house to all of her favorite spots. But the real convincer was the stripling of small scars on her snout from an unfortunate encounter with a porcupine when she was young. This should not be the first time that we're hearing about the scars on Radar's nose. And here's why it is. Here's why we're hearing about this the first time. The book ends with dates. November 25th, 2020 through February 7th, 2022. Why do we get that? Is that, what are we doing here? Are you telling us how long it took you to write the novel? Is this when the novel is being written? Like, what are we doing with that? It doesn't matter. These are, so here's what Neil Gaiman said about writing. A first draft is to get your story out. The second draft is to make it look like you knew what you were doing the whole time. That detail about Radar's nose should have been inserted way back when Charlie was first meeting Radar. Now, obviously, it didn't have to be planted there from the beginning, but if Stephen King got to the end of the book and realized he needed those scars on Radar's nose, the first time Charlie goes to babysit Radar and Mr. Bowditch, Radar comes up to him and sticks her snout right in Charlie's face. And he asks Bowditch about the scars on her nose. Then Bowditch would explain it. The same thing would happen when Radar gets to Dad's house. Something just like that. We can make it a character quirk of Radar. She always sniffs a person's mouth. Always something like that. Then, when it is reinserted to the story here at the end, we get that callback to the very first time that we meet Radar, to the very first time that Radar meets Dad, to the very first time that Radar meets Charlie. That is how you do that. That is how that is done. And look, I'm not telling Stephen King anything. Stephen King knows that. Stephen King knows that way better than me. It seems to me, if I'm allowed to assert, Stephen King wrote this book in a lazy fashion. The dialogue was lazy. The characters were lazy. The way that everything wrapped up was lazy. The way that everything in Impus just sort of worked out once Charlie decided to start fighting was lazy. The way all of a sudden we start hearing about a prince that is coming to save these people right before Charlie decides he's the prince was lazy. And it's unfortunate. It really is unfortunate because Stephen King, of all the good and bad things that I could say about him before reading this book, I don't believe that lazy was ever on the list of criticisms. I don't believe. Extra, maybe, that he used to throw in a whole bunch of extra stuff once in a while, but it didn't really ever detract from the story. The knock on Stephen King is that Stephen King is not a literary writer. Okay, well, if that's what you want to say, that's what you want to say. I can agree. But the sort of real sin to throwing in extra stuff that doesn't need to be there, is that it detracts from the things that do need to be there. This story, I wouldn't say is extra in the same way that a lot of Stephen King is extra. In, for example, The Shining, we get a whole lot of flashbacks that develop character, but really nothing else. But that's sort of a literary thing, right? Here, we have a whole lot of extra stuff going on that doesn't ever really pay off, that doesn't ever really lead to anything, that Christopher Pauli has to be brought back up later just to tell us that he was stabbed under a bridge and couldn't defend himself because he still had broken wrists. Okay, Birdie Bird was in there. We never got anything with Birdie Bird. Okay, it is what it is. In fact, kind of the whole thing with Bowditch. I mean, what if Charlie just found what looked like a haunted house in the middle of the woods and there happened to be this dog still running around? I mean, Bowditch, I don't think, is all that indispensable to the story. And in fact, that might be one of the most critical things about this story that I have to say, is that Bowditch, the character, was so unceremoniously written off even by Charlie and somehow by everyone in Impus by the end of the story. So, in Leah, if Leah knew about Bowditch, the queen knew about Bowditch, he must have been fairly well liked. He must have been fairly important to things that were going on. So, I don't know. I'll be back with a review for this book. I have to mull over a lot of what it is that I want to say about this book, because I'm still not sure I understand what I think about this book. Is this book for younger readers? I hate to use a term like this, but it's simple in that way, that we are supposed to just go along with whatever is given to us. We're not really supposed to question the things that happen in the story. Not a whole lot of young readership type stuff going on. We're told about fairy tales and that it's supposed to be sort of indicative of what fairy tales used to be, this story, but does the idea of Christopher Pauli being stabbed in an under a bridge need to be there for children? What about Charlie losing his virginity? Does that need to be there for children? I don't know. But we will be back with a review, I believe, around the beginning of June. So be back for that. All I do is literature here, poetry every Mondays. Hope to have you back for the next one.